Welcome to another S&P 500 analysis. In this week's video, we're going to take a little bit more deeper look into the market internal to see has the market capitulated yet and put in a bottom for this downward move, or is there more downside to come? So stay tuned. All right, before we start looking at the chart of the indexes, let's just do a quick run through on the performance on the indexes. Looking at this table here, we see that last week all the indexes are down. So it's month to date and year to date. And the last week the worst performers, pretty much everybody across the board is not that much different, right? Although the industrial is only down less than 8%. But everybody else is pretty much close to that 9 and 10%, and with the Nasdaq Composite at 10%. So you could say the Nasdaq is the one that did the worst. And month to date, we have the transportation seems to be a little bit over down 10%. And year to date, again, is the Nasdaq and also the Russell 2000, and so is the transportation. So all in all, it's pretty much, the across the board, it's not that much difference, and the indexes are down so far for the month to date and year to date. And here, looking at the 11th sector in the S&P 500, we see again, they are all down for the week, for last week, and also month to date and year to date. And we could see that the here's the energy seems to be the worst performer last week, and followed by the technology XLK and the financial. And if we look at the month to date, again, the energy is the worst performer. Year to date, the technology is the worst performer, the XLK, down over 21%, while the here's the discretionary, consumer discretionary is down a little bit over 18.5%. So the best performer so far for year to date is the real estate. That's a little bit surprising. It's only down 4.2%. And here, looking at some of the key industry sector, looking at semiconductor seems to be the worst performer last week, followed by the oil processor or the refiners. Energy is pretty much down almost 24%, while the biotech is down 13%. Now the bond TLT, the long-term bond, is up 2.71%. And notice that it is up year to date, month to date, and week to date. So that is the only one that is up so far for year to date. And looking at the year to date, the semiconductor is the worst performer, down 25%, with the oil, energy sector industry 19%, retailers almost 18.5%. So is the regional bank. So we can see the bank is also kind of weak as well, and that kind of reflected on the XLF in one of the 11 sector in the S&P 500. And here, looking at the Magnificent Seven plus extra stock here with Netflix, AMD, and SMCI here. So you can see everybody's down for year to date and month to date, week to date. Last week, the worst performer is AMD, and in the Magnificent Seven is the NVIDIA. So again, semiconductors is getting hit last week the most, right? Because we just saw that in the previous table. And here, looking at year to date, Tesla is the worst performer. It's down over 40% year to date, followed by the NVIDIA, almost 30%, and AMD is 29%. So you can see a lot of these stock, these FANGs or Magnificent Seven stock are getting hit now. Okay, let's take a look at this monthly chart of the S&P 500. You see that ever since that made a high in February, we got this March coming down, and so far, the first 4 days of April is pretty treacherous. Right, you see that it came down. I believe this is, let's see, how much is that? Almost 10%, 9.66% for the week, and 541 point, 542 point from end of March to so far in April. And right now it's getting close to this 30-week moving average here, because basically I'm plotting the 30-week moving average cloud using the weekly closing price. And here, looking at the weekly chart of the SP 500, you see that it broke this trend line here, right? And it came down, put in a low, and then we have a lower high, and we're looking for this low to get taken out, and which it did, and put in a lower low. Right now, it seems to be heading down toward this trend line. It's also in confluence with this level somewhere around this 5,000 areas. So I wouldn't be surprised that we will see this 5,000 area get tested and see what we get a bounce off of that 5,000, that psychological level here, and then put in another lower high, then we resume back down. And here's a daily chart of the S&P 500. You can see that it's rolling over and coming down on this 30-day moving average cloud, and also below this 30-week moving average, and the 30-week moving average is turning down. Right, so we're going to take a look at the price action in more detail later on in this video, and then to map out some of the scenario and identify some of the key level to watch for the coming week and for the near term. And here's the Dow Jones Industrial. We see the Dow Jones Industrial is also making a series lower high, lower low, and basically watching this 38,000 level here. So coming down to this somewhere around this 38,000 area, and possibly get down to this trend line. We got this low level here somewhere around 37,700 area. These pivot low and pivot high here, just basically turning resistance into support. So right now we'll see would it be able to find support here once again coming down at this level. And here's the New York Stock Exchange Composite. It came down to near this support level here, potential support level. So we're going to see would it get a bounce in the coming week, and see how high it will bounce up. We probably expect it will encounter some resistance up here, back up at this 18,800 if it could bounce up that high. Or the little bit more closer in proximity will be somewhere around this 18,400 or so if it bounces up. But we're again basically looking for a continuation of this downtrend move. So even though if we get a bounce, it's most likely just going to put in another lower high and then come back down and put in a lower low. And here's the NASDAQ 100. You see the NASDAQ 100 is also put in a series of lower low, lower high. So right now it's basically coming down to this 17,400. We're looking at it to come down somewhere around the 17,000 level. So again, we're going to take a look at the price action in a little bit more detail in the later on in this video. And here's the Russell 2000, the small cap. You see it came down to this pivot high here. Basically, this little bit of a inverted head and shoulder pattern with a neckline here. Right now, it came down pretty close to the 1770 area. So I would expect it after a little bounce, maybe possibly come up and fill this gap, and then come back down and take out this low, this pivot here, and probably will come down and test these low here, this pivot low down at 1680 area. And here's the Dow Jones Transportation. You see the Dow Jones Transportation is coming straight down, seems like, to this 12,500, and that's the next level that I'll be watching. Although, it got a little bit nice reversal at the near the end of the session there on the Dow Jones Transportation, but basically still looking for, after this bounce is complete, we basically looking for another lower high, and then come down, put in another lower low. don't believe this is the low for the transportation for this particular downward move. Before we take a look at the sentiment and the internal on a daily basis, I just want to show you how much of a selling pressure there was on Friday. I was looking at this up-down volume ratio just on the S&P 500. See right here, it is 42 to 1 in favor of the down volume. So you see how much of a selling pressure there was on Friday on the S&P 500. And here on the New York Stock Exchange, here is also it's like 44, 45 to 1 in favor of the down volume. In addition to that, if we take a look at the advance and decline, now this is for the S&P 500. There's only 500 stock, right? And there's 475 more declining issue than advancing issue. So we're basically talking about 90% or more of the S&P 500 stock were down on Friday. And likewise, we have almost 2,500 more declining stock than advancing stock in the New York Stock Exchange. And right now, basically, there are somewhere around 3,400 stock traded in the New York Stock Exchange, and that puts it close in, in the 90% of the stock were down on Friday. So you can see the bond market participation on the downside and also the up-down volume ratio here at the beginning of the session. In the morning session, you see how much selling pressure there was, selling these stock down. And here looking at the NASDAQ, this is the NASDAQ 100. That's where the Apple, the Tesla, the Magnificent Seven, the FANG stock is sitting in this index, right? Look at here. This is like over 250 to 1 in favor of the down volume. You see how much of a selling pressure that basically just is dumping those Magnificent Seven stock like there's no tomorrow here on this chart, right? It's showing us that there was just tremendous amount of selling there. And here's the NASDAQ composite, and we're only talking about maybe 7 or 8 to 1 in favor of the down volume. And also looking at the advanced decline. Remember, the NASDAQ 100 is only a 100 stock in that index, and 97 more declining issue than advancing issue. So that means there's only 3 split among advance and decline. That's almost 100%. This is like 99% of the stock in the NASDAQ 100 were down on Friday. And again, here with the NASDAQ, it's almost 90%, 85 to 90% of the stock traded in the NASDAQ on Friday were down. So you can see the tremendous amount of selling going on Friday. And on this chart, I just want to show you that look at the cumulative tick and also the ticks. Basically, we are seeing a lot of selling here. Right? You see this minus 1,500. Typically, when we get down to minus 1,000, we got a lot of institutions selling into the market. And likewise, when it is up at positive 1,000, you got a lot of buying. So this is tremendous amount of selling. And you see that there's a cumulative tick here just continue to move downward. So there is no bounces at all of any substantial magnitude, although we did see some buying up here, when it get up to this 500, between 500 and 1,000. We did see a few tick, a positive tick went over 1,000, but these right here, 1,500, 12, minus 1,200, I mean, those are very negative tick. And here's the NASDAQ, likewise with the NASDAQ, right? NASDAQ here, this one here is almost 1,900. Right, so that is tremendous, amount of selling there. See, the tick is basically a difference between the stock that traded on the uptick versus the stock that traded in the downtick. So it's a difference between that. So when we talk about 1,900 minus 1,900, that means there are 1,900 more stock traded on the downtick than the stock traded on the uptick. So that means there's a lot of selling going on. In addition to that, you could also see that the advanced decline, well, it kind of bottomed out, in the morning session, and then during the afternoon coming back from lunch, then in the afternoon, it did come back up. So some of the stock did turn positive or get back into the neutral and positive territory. So there was some improvement on the advanced decline. throughout the afternoon. Likewise in the Nasdaq, but not enough to reverse the market. So it definitely is pretty negative, even though it reversed back up. Some of the stock, maybe we're talking about a few hundred, but it's still down at this minus 2,400 and minus 3,000 level. Now, looking at this sentiment chart here, the VIX, you see the VIX on Friday went up to 45.31. This is the highest point that we haven't seen since back in 2020. This is April 2020, and this is the pandemic, right? And that is somewhere up at 75 area. So you can see that definitely the market participants are getting very fearful on Friday here. Now let me zoom this out here, and then we take a look at the put call ratio is also above 1. So definitely the market participants are getting very bearish and risk off. And on this daily chart of the up-down volume ratio, you see that the up-down volume ratio been spiking down, and it was minus 10 on Friday. You see these level, it's way back here, back in August, and also back in April. Last year, we're seeing that is down at this minus 13 area. Now, if we go back to believe 2022, and this is back in June, and this right here is minus 60, right? Minus 60 to 1 on the up-down volume ratio. And we are looking at the advanced decline, the daily advanced decline. We could also see it spiking down. So obviously there are a lot of fearful people rushing out the door there. But we still have not seen capitulation yet, because this candle here is just a constant selling and selling into the close and closing near the low. It doesn't indicate there are some capitulation that buyers start stepping back in, and all the people that want to sell have already sold. Now that might be the case, but typically we do not see this type of price action on a capitulation or the final phase of capitulation. We'll see something like this. This is a possible capitulation, because it opened down and then moved down. Then all of a sudden, buyers stepping back in, because anybody that want to sell is probably already sold, and the buyers start stepping back in and bidding it back up. So you can see that's why you get this, hollow candle, even though it's red, that indicate the price was down from the previous close, but the price is actually bidding up. The close is above the open. So this is a bullish type of price action move, even though it closed down. And we are not seeing that on last Friday, because you see this open here on a gap down, and it continued to sell off and close near the low of the day. And here, looking at the New York Stock Exchange new high, new low, you see that there were 1,032 stock make new 52-week low on Friday. So that's basically 30 some odd percent of the stock traded in the New York Stock Exchange make new low. So you can see, how much of these stock were borderline near the low of the year, or the 52 weeks. So you can see that is a tremendous amount of stock getting beat up. And right now, if we go back and take a look at previously, you see these clusters of number of stock making new 52-week low. So we are not there yet in terms of making a bottom here. We might get a little bit of a dead cat bounce, but definitely I think we're going to see a lower low, because until we flush out all those despair longs there and have them capitulate and just get out at any cost, then we see the market start to turn around. But right now, I think this is just a beginning, the early phase of this flushing out the SS of these late longs, and people just kind of still holding their stock with hope that it will come back up. And here, looking at the cumulative AD line, so basically right now we are seeing a strong move downward, and also we have confirmation with the cumulative AD line. In other words, it is moving in unison with each other. So they are making a lower low, as well as the S&P 500 is closing with a lower low. And looking at the Nasdaq market up-down volume ratio, we did see a little bit of a selling pressure. Remember we looked at earlier on the Friday, the intraday up-down volume ratio, we saw a tremendous amount of selling on the Nasdaq 100, basically the Magnificent Seven of the FANG stock. But for the Nasdaq overall, the up-down volume ratio was not that negative, right? Because it was, I think the lowest point was somewhere around 10 or something like that. But we are looking at -7 at the end of the day. But look at here on these right here, we're basically looking at a -20 or more, right, on the downside in favor of the down volume. Now on the advanced decline, we actually have broad market decline in the Nasdaq, looking at 3,100 more declining issue than advancing issue for almost 2 consecutive days, Thursday and Friday. So that is pretty bearish in terms of the downside and the broad market participation on the downside. And looking at the Nasdaq new high, new low, we actually have 1456, 1,456 stock make new 52-week low on Friday versus only 33 stock make new 52-week high. So you can see this huge spike down. The net difference between the new high, new low is 1423 more new 52-week low than 52-week high. And here we see that the cumulative AD line just took a dive down in the Nasdaq along with the Nasdaq 100. So what we have just saw is that the internal is turning much negative now, but the thing is we have not seen a capitulation type of internal reaction, because right now we are still seeing a further weakness in the internals to come. So, and also this price action here do not indicate to us that this is a some sort of capitulation price action. So I wouldn't be surprised that we get a bounce next week and then make another leg down, and maybe the next leg down, the next low, we could see a possible capitulation on that low. But right now, I don't believe this is any indication of a capitulation. Look at this daily chart of the S&P 500. Remember last week we were talking about the possibility of taking out this low here to put in a lower low. And we were looking also at a little bit of a bounce here as well. That's one possibility to come up to this upper range and then push us down into this zone here near the 5,400. And that would come down and test the lower range. Then we were basically looking at this 5,100 area in a little bit of further out, not necessarily from last week. And as you can see on Friday, it came down and it took out this 5,100 area and actually went below that, and it settled down at 5074.09 on Friday. So right now it is below this zone here. And here we are looking at what the market is pricing in for the coming week. And for the upper range is basically coming back up to this 5,400 area. And it's between 53.90 and 53.73.80. And the lower range is coming down to this, dip below to this 4,800 area. And the low range is between 4774.40 and 4625. So basically it's trying to come into these two low volume zone here. We see that there is a little bit of a support term resistance down here in this area here. And then we also have a little bit of a price action down here, 4625. So we're basically looking for the possibility of maybe getting a little bit of a bounce. And if we do get a bounce, maybe it will try to come up and fill this gap and tag this this upper range of the expected move, and testing this 5,400 area once again, and then get another push down. Now, will we get it to come back down to the 4,800 level next week? Well, that's a possibility. It's just like what it did last week to take out this 5,100. But I'm not sure that we will see that, but there's always that possibility because the market is pricing in the lower range to be below that 4,800 level. So depending on what the selling pressure is for the coming week, we definitely have to have an open mind for the possibility of this 4,800 to get tested next week. Then the upside will be the 5,400. So those are the two key levels that we want to keep an eye on for the S&P 500. And here looking at the ES, the E-mini S&P 500, we see that it again also came up and tagged the upper range before it pushes back down to take out the lower range. And right now we're basically looking at the possibility of moving down into this near the 5,000 area here. So there is a little bit of a zone between 5,100 and 5,000. But I wouldn't be surprised to see that 5,000 get taken out. So we'll take a look at that a little bit later on to see what the market is pricing in for the coming week. But definitely, basically pretty much, play out what we are expecting for a lower low and a, basically this lower high. So right now we actually got a little bit of another lower high here and another lower low. So we could be looking at something like this maybe coming up. So let's go and take a look at what the market is pricing in for the coming week. So here's what the market is pricing in. The upper range is 54.25 and 53.98.50. So basically looking at this 5400 area. And the low range is down at this 4800 area at 47.95 and 46.60. So the one of the possible scenarios that maybe we get a little bounce up here, try to push up into this 5400 and then pushes back down into this 5,000 area, put in a lower low, then maybe we could chop around here and then eventually move it down into this 4,800, 4,700 area, into this high volume area. So that's basically what we're going to be keeping an eye out for the coming week on the ES. So the upside is 5,400 and the downside is 4,800. And here's what the SPY did last week. Again, it took out this low, came up, did not tag the upper range on the SPY, but it come down, it did tag the low range. So let's go and take a look at what the market is pricing in for the coming week. So here we see that the market is pricing in, again, this 540 area at 538 and 534.80 for the upper range. And the lower range is down here at this 480 area. That's between 475.80 and 462.50. So right now the price is inside of this balance area. So we probably get a little bounce up here, maybe get up to this 53 and possibly work up to this 54. This 540 area at this upper range, and then get another push down, working toward down to this 480 area and take out this low to put in a lower low. So then we could be looking at something like this. So again, the key area to watch is the 540 and 480. And here's what the QQQ did last week. Came up, tagged the upper range up at this 20,000 level, pushes down and dipped below this 18,800, and then went down to the 17,600 area, this low volume zone. So it did tag the lower range and close outside of this weekly expected move range here. So right now we're basically looking at the possibility of maybe get a bounce up and then pushes making a lower low. So let's go and see what the market is pricing in for the coming week. All right, let's take a look at what the market is pricing in. I might have to readjust these level here because I think some of the quote from the option market is a little bit off. So I'm going to wait and maybe after Monday to see how much different it is and to see what kind of adjustment I need to make. But right now, basically looking at the possibility of 18,800, and I'd be more keying in on this 18,000 than the 18,800, maybe possibly into here on this 18,400 area. But in regardless, we're going to be looking at the possibility of a bounce back up, possibly get up into this area here, then pushes back down into this 16,800 and possibly work itself down to the 16,000 area. So again, we're still basically looking for a continuation of this lower high and lower low type of price action moving down to a low. So we are looking at possibility of this area here, to get tested. So basically looking at that 16,000 area and see what we get a bounce off of that, or maybe a little bit of a capitulation low that we were talking about, the possibility, because I don't believe this is the capitulation low here. So never know, right? Maybe on Monday we open down and then capitulate it and start coming back up. So we just have to keep an open mind and watch the price action. And finally, looking at the QQQ. Now that was the NQ, so I was mistakenly say it was the QQQ. Here's the QQQ. You can see that last week it basically took out this low, put in a lower low, and it came back up. It did not come up to this upper range, and then it flushes down. So for the coming week, this is what the market is pricing in. And the market is pricing in between 453 and 449.90 on the upper range, and the lower range is between 395.50 and 386.70. So what we'll be watching is basically looking for a possibility of a bounce and possibly come up to fill this gap here and also go to this high volume area and come up to this 450 zone here and possibly test this upper range and then get another push down. Take out the 410 area and push it down into the 395. And there's a zone here. There's a low volume zone here. And also, it was a resistance turn support level. So we probably will see a little bit of a price reaction here near the 395 area. So in summary, the market is showing a lot of selling pressure here in the past week. And it doesn't look like that selling pressure will subside anytime soon, because I don't believe that we have seen the low yet. Although we could see a little bit of a dead cat bounce in the coming week, but we also have to be prepared for a continuation of a downward movement. And until we see some sort of capitulation, I think we still have to be very cautious about of taking any sort of a extended position in the long side. So right now we are still, looking at lower low, the possibility of a lower low. So if you like the content in this video, be sure to smash the thumbs up to help promote this video on YouTube. And if you're new to this channel, click on to subscribe to help support this channel. And you would like to see additional content from me, go visit my newsletter, The Pulse of the Market, where you find additional content on trade ideas, the Magnificent Seven stock analysis, and also daily trade plan and other, content about market and stocks. So good luck on your trading and stay safe.